Chapter 6. I First Felt It. Friday, 3 days later, I headed up to Detroit again to spend time with Jay. I hadn't slept at all after the conversation with Iowa Girl. That conversation lasted into early Friday morning. The thoughts of seeing Jay pushed my suicidal mentality to the back burner. We picked another restaurant from which to order food. We picked another hotel in a different part of the Detroit metro area to share a room for the day. We again shared magic together for many hours, making more videos together to document the experience. Much later that night, Jay asked me to take her back to her house. That time, though, she was staying at her dad's place. His house was in central Detroit, within the boundaries of the city proper. I dropped Jay off at her dad's house. That weird feeling which I experienced the first night was back in my head, but I pushed it aside. Our days together continued with that pattern. We would order food from a new restaurant each time and find a new hotel in the Detroit area. Some nights, I attended to other business after I dropped Jay off. Some mornings, I picked her up again and we went to eat somewhere. One night, after dropping Jay at her dad's house, I had almost made it back home. It was cold and snowing. The roads were slick as I drove on the highway through Toledo. On one of the overpasses, before the bridge over the Maumee River, a pickup truck suddenly spun out at 60 miles an hour a few hundred yards ahead. The pickup took out two cars in the lanes to its left, on its way to slamming into the cement dividers on the far left shoulder. I managed to brake just in time to stop, only feet from impact with the driver's side of the pickup. I, being me, recorded a video. The video suddenly became much more intense as I saw a tractor-trailer appear in all of my mirrors at once. I heard the constant blare of the truck's horn as the semi barreled towards the rear of my car. As I watched, holding my phone as it recorded, I was frozen. I had no time. Had there been time to react, there was a smashed pickup truck directly a few feet in front of me. The lanes to the right of the pickup had three other incapacitated and smashed up cars. Car parts were littered from one side of the highway to the other, and on the left side of my car was a cement barricade. I remained frozen as the giant semi somehow managed to swerve at the last possible second. The Doppler effect of the horn as the 18-wheeler careened by me, inches from smashing me to pieces, was deafening. As quickly as it all happened, I was suddenly out of immediate danger. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I sent Jay the video as I regained my composure. I told her in the following text how close I had been to death just then. About a half hour passed, and I was back home when I received Jay's reply. Glad you're okay. Talk to you soon. I fell in love with Jay quickly, but I couldn't shake that nagging feeling that something was off. I stayed overnight in the Detroit area on nights when I planned to see her the next morning. She was always pleasant. Her mood was always positive. I learned from her to be easy, as she would say. I picked Jay up on a cold and snowy morning, and we went to eat and hang out at a coffee shop for a few hours. We cuddled by a fireplace and talked. She knew I felt something wasn't right. I had brought it up to her. For the first and only time, Jay's happy-go-lucky facade broke. Suddenly confused, I saw tears fall from her beautiful eyes. I pulled her close to me. What's wrong? I hate what I'm doing to you. Jay's hitched words came through as she cried. I don't understand. Jay cried for a few more minutes as I held her to my body. Don't cry. I want to protect you from anything bad. I wish I could take your sadness as my own. I kissed her forehead. Jay gripped me back tightly in response. The moment passed. Soon it was as if Jay had never been sad at all. She was her beautiful, happy, bubbly self again. I remained confused for a moment longer. We left the coffee shop, and I dropped her off at her dad's house that afternoon. We both had other obligations that day. I parked my car on the street a few houses down from my destination that afternoon. Colfax Street was in a rather uninviting area of southwest Detroit. I walked from a few houses down the street. I knocked on the front door. I was, according to my transgender prostitute friend, the only person she trusted to hang out in her living room. She let me in, and I sat down on a couch on the main floor. I knew she had company, both upstairs and down in her basement. That day, I didn't sit long. My friend needed a ride down the street. She put on her coat, and I stood up again. We walked out the door and to my car. I turned from Colfax Street. My friend directed me toward Gratiot. The two of us ended up on a side street, parked just shy of a cross street. 2 car lengths ahead, parked perpendicular at the cross street junction, was a police car with an officer sitting inside. The street where I parked was a one-way. I had parked on the left. As the officer watched from his cruiser, or maybe he wasn't paying attention, a car with a chameleon paint job and completely blacked out windows pulled up on the passenger side of my car. My friend's window went down. So did the driver's window of the chameleon car, but only enough for a hand to reach out. All I saw of whomever was in the car next to me was a hand, taking money from my friend's hand and reaching back out to give her a little bag. If the police officer had seen the transaction, which I couldn't imagine he hadn't, he didn't make a single effort to acknowledge either of our cars. Soon the two of us were back on Colfax. Once back inside the house, my friend cleared out the basement for me. I was tired. I wanted to rest, but I put a plan into action. My friend only likes snow, but her clients often requested ice cream. That was where I came in. Anytime you have a client looking to party, stop down here to see me. I'll make it happen. It was an easy gig, at least so far during the daytime. I spent the rest of that week kicking back in the basement during the daytime while my friend rotated her clients through her home. Frequently, she would text me a specific number. I would put that much in a little bag. She would come down with a client's money and make the exchange. The whole scene at that house was different when I arrived late night one night after leaving my friend Kevin's apartment in Downriver. I had a backpack on me that night. In it, a metal pipe and a kilogram of meth which I had picked up earlier that afternoon. A weird series of feelings washed over me as I was suddenly standing alone in that basement. Who was that second group of people who walked in the front door earlier and hurried upstairs? How many guys had come up from the basement before my friend directed me to go down there? How many people had I glimpsed for brief seconds during that hour while I was still sitting in the living room of that house deep in the inner city of southwest Detroit that night? The 2.2 pounds of crystal methamphetamine in my backpack seemed to weigh me down to the floor. The steel pipe next to the drugs on my back suddenly seemed too light, nothing more than a toy, a wiffle ball bat. A moment before, I found myself standing there alone in that basement in Detroit. My friend had given me less of a request and more of a direction. I need to take a friend down the street to score a rock. Be right here when I get back. I heard the front door close on the ground floor above me as people walked out. There was then just one pressing and pervasive thought in my mind, overruling all else. Run. Fortunately, when I ran up from the basement and out the back door in the middle of the night, I still had all of my belongings on me. I also still had my health. I ran through neighboring backyards to my car. I texted my friend as I sped away. Sorry, an emergency came up. I had to hit the road. Let me know later if you happen to need anything. Chapter 7. Calling Me Home. I picked Jay up from her dad's house in Detroit. I pulled around the block so we could sit and talk for a bit. She brought her new little dog with her that day. The dog was cute and well behaved. He sat in the back seats as Jay and I talked. Occasionally, Jay had to stop her dog from humping the back seat. The sun was out that day, but every now and then a cloud passed overhead and dropped some snow. I thought I could finish the removal of the fingernail on my bad mower finger right there in the car. I recorded video of Jay being grossed out and laughing as I tried to remove the nail. With the splint off, I pushed on the nail. It was only attached at the very top. I pushed the top stuck part down and I showed Jay. It was gross. It hurt. I came close to finishing the job, but it just wasn't time yet. When I went home that day, I convinced Jay to come with me. We first dropped off Jay's dog. She made sure I would bring her back home at the end of the night. Though I still found that to be weird, I was simply happy that she was coming back with me for the day. As soon as I got on the highway from the surface streets, Jay fell asleep. She slept until we exited the highway in Perrysburg an hour later. I ordered a pizza. Jay looked beautiful as she danced in her socks on the Brazilian pecan of my living room floor. The sun's rays shined through the windows and reflected from the floor around her as she danced. She hadn't realized I was looking at her from the kitchen. Her bashful smile and look away were super cute when she looked over to see me smiling in her direction. I set up a camera with a full view of the section of my bedroom with my bed, and Jay and I made hours of videos in my bedroom. I recorded just one time as we began making love. When I stopped the video at the end, it was 4.5 hours long. It seemed like so much time had passed. It was like the end of 2018 was a non-stop memorable experience. Jay and I continued making memories and videos together. I was in love. I felt I could give that girl all of me forever. I told her of my crystal use. She wasn't happy, but she didn't judge me. She wanted me to stop at some point. I told her I would stop by the new year. I meant it. The weather was cold. The snow was lightly falling. It was barely noon one day as Jay and I were out driving in Detroit. I turned the music down in my car. As our seats stopped vibrating, I asked Jay what she wanted to do. She was ready to get a room. I found one in the travel app on my phone. It was a motel that time, not a hotel. The two of us got the room key and drove around to the separate building where our room was located. We walked in the room as quickly as possible to get out of the cold. That day, Jay and I made love for 10 hours straight. Our clothes were strewn about. Our bodies touched every surface of the room. Jay was covered in my sweat, so was the bed. I was in heaven with Jay every time we were intimate. I was never happy when the time would come to drop her off. I couldn't get enough of her. I felt a way with her I had not felt in many years. I loved to see her smile. The time came to drop Jay off at her mom's house that night. I didn't say much on the drive across the city. That nagging feeling was stronger than ever. Was it all in my head, or had I still been missing something? When I stopped my car across the street from Jay's mom's place, I turned to look at her. She looked back at me. We held each other's gaze. Suddenly, Jay reached over and hugged me close to her. We kissed and she released her embrace. Our eyes locked again. I felt desperation as her gaze was almost apologetic. Maybe she felt sad for me. Maybe it was something else. I sat, confused, as Jay walked up to the townhouse complex where she lived. I sat there another minute. When she was out of sight, I felt lost. I drove away. I reached the motel about a half hour later. I had missed a turn due to road construction, and I had to backtrack. I was physically exhausted from sleep deprivation and 10 hours of intimate activity. I was mentally exhausted. I felt my love slipping away, and I didn't know why. I was eager to get back in the motel room, blow down some hot rails, and relax. I opened the motel door. As I walked in, my eye caught something I wasn't expecting. I turned to stare at the bed. My eyes widened. My heartbeat increased. I was in disbelief. It was something I'd never seen besides in pictures online. I inhaled sharply and took a step closer to the bed. I held my breath as I leaned in a bit more. No way. There was no way. Jay and I had spent 10 hours all over that room. Our clothes had been strewn everywhere. Our bodies had been together on all surfaces which could support us in any position. I leaned in just a bit more. I watched as the engorged bedbug casually made its way from the top left corner of the bed to the bottom right corner. I froze for just a second. Then I grabbed 2 disposable translucent plastic cups from the bathroom. I caught the bug with one cup and quickly stacked the second cup into the first. I walked to the sink. I let a little water fill the space between the 2 stacked cups which held the bedbug. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I got on an internet search as fast as I could. I searched for images of bedbugs. Yes, it was a bedbug. I was disgusted. I made sure I had all my items from the motel room. I left with the cups and walked to the motel office. I walked inside the office as angry as I had been in a long time. I thrust the cups out toward the desk clerk. I said some choice words and I demanded my money back. I grew more angry when I found out the phone travel app was needed to reimburse me. I walked outside into the cold and I left the bedbug cups for the motel front desk. A half hour passed as I waited on hold with the travel app's customer service. I first had to deal with the refund. I then had to deal with no openings at any nearby hotels. I then had to deal with the fact that the only open room nearby was a $50 upcharge from the room I had just vacated. I acquiesced hastily. I was cold and tired, still standing outside the motel office in the middle of the night. I was mad. I felt defeated. The bug had grossed me out. I finally booked the only available room at a hotel. It was basically right across the street from the motel. I saw the hotel from where I was standing. I checked the reviews online. No sign of bed bugs in the patrons' descriptions of their stays. Spread out all my clothes and items in the kitchen of the hotel room as soon as I walked inside. I did hot rails, fully naked as I inspected everything. I shook out clothes. I emptied my pockets. I felt contaminated and dirty. I texted Jay to have her call me right away. She read the messages but didn't respond. I was annoyed and I left her a voicemail. I kept checking all my items the rest of the night. I checked the bed and the room as well. I decided to catch a few hours of sleep. From that evening, I began a new paranoia of hotel rooms. The plan for the next morning had me picking Jay up from her house so we could go to an art supply store. She needed colored pencils for something. The two of us had decided to run that errand around 10 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't slept for a while, so I ended up sleeping until 11 o'clock. I checked my phone when I woke. There were no missed calls or texts from Jay. I called down to the front desk to secure a late checkout. I was good until 1 o'clock. I didn't text or call Jay that morning. I did meticulously go through all my clothing a few more times. I seemed to be in the clear. I showered and did hot rails. Just before 1 o'clock, I checked through all my items one last time. I gathered all my belongings from the kitchen in the hotel room and walked out to my car. I sat in my car for a few minutes. It was cold. I was cold. I looked at the screen of my phone. Nothing from Jay. I decided to leave Michigan. I wanted to go home and do laundry on an extra hot washing machine setting. It was gray and cloudy outside. The feeling I had inside me matched the weather. I never saw Jay again after that day of the bedbug. She sent me a text the next day after I came back from Michigan. She asked me if I was all right. I told her I didn't know. 2 days later, I sent her a message. It was a farewell letter. I told Jay that I loved her. I told her I was happy and thankful for all the time we shared together. I told her that whatever else was going on was okay, and I would always look back on our time together fondly. I told her I hoped one day she would find a love with openness and honesty, and with all she needs to be happy forever. I wished her the best always. I told her I would always be there if she ever needed me. Jay replied to my letter. She thanked me for our time together, same as I had thanked her. She told me she would always have love in her heart for me. She told me she was sad it was the end. She said goodbye. I felt grateful for every moment I shared with her. I knew, even though I hurt, that any pain was completely worth it to be able to feel that magical feeling of being in love. I was sad, but I let go of Jay that day. I reflected on my time with her. I reflected on myself and on the things which I learned since my marriage had ended a few years prior. I thought about how my entire life had become something unfamiliar since 2018 began. I thought ahead to the coming changes in the near future. I resigned myself to my place in the universe. I was set to move from my house in 2 weeks. I would no longer have the security of my residence. I thought deeply that day. I knew, beyond a doubt, that I was about to face life as I had never before. It was the end of November 2018. I had jumped into a new online world a full year prior. I had scaled up my activity in a drug-fueled world as well. I left the corporate world in May, a world which I had served for 2 decades. I had all but dropped out of my familiar social circles. Lifelong friends still had a place in my life, but they were phased out to a minimum. New friends and associations filled any gaps in my social world. New sexual partners, new online dynamics, and new business associates. Friendships and genuine camaraderie were forged from like interests in substances and chance interactions online. I trusted some with my life. I trusted others only enough to know I wasn't in immediate danger. I cut ties anytime I felt something was wrong. Chapter 8. Token White. Michaela and I left her grandmother's house. full stomachs from the holiday meal, we both tossed our plates of leftovers in the back seat of my car. The two of us then headed to Michaela's mom's house. I took surface streets of Toledo that Thanksgiving to reach Michaela's mom's neighborhood. In summer, the groups of teens in Michaela's mom's neighborhood would casually meander back and forth in the street. As my speed slowed to under 5 miles an hour, Michaela told me not to stop my car no matter what. I would creep through as the teens eyed me intensely. Seeing I wasn't stopping completely, the teens would eventually part in front of my car as I slowly rolled by. The streets were empty that Thanksgiving. It was cold and snowing hard. The afternoon sky was gray and bleak. There were no leaves on the trees. Any ground not covered in snow was brown. It was the beginning of winter in northwest Ohio. There was nobody outside. Michaela's mom's house was a crack and heroin den. I'd come to my friend's rescue from her mom's place on occasions earlier in the year. People were sometimes passed out in random spots around the house. Furniture, floors, it didn't seem to matter. Wherever the drugs took hold was where the bodies lay. I parked in the gravel in the front yard of the house. Michaela wanted to swing by and wish her mom a happy Thanksgiving. I figured I could trade someone some crystal and get some crack to mix up in a syringe later on back at my house. Michaela didn't use needles, but for some reason, I really wanted to shoot an upper cocktail that day. Michaela's mom, Janet, and some white guy were the only people in the house that day. The white guy was 15 or so years older than I was. I guessed, based on his appearance. You never knew when it came to drug addicts, though. It was haphazard with age progression. I was 38. Most people guessed I was in my late 20s. I'd met people in their late 20s who looked well over 38. I shook hands with the white guy. "Hi, I'm Doug." "I'm Bob. Nice to meet you." I reached into one of my pockets. I tossed a bag with a single crystal to the table in front of Janet. "Happy holidays, Janet. You know the quality level of my stuff. I'm looking to mix it up tonight. Toss me something back whenever you get around to it." I then heard a noise coming from out front by my car. At least that's where I thought I heard it. I walked over to the front door. I told the people inside I'd be back in a minute. I walked out onto the front porch. I stepped into the frigid winter afternoon and closed the front door behind me. I then walked to my right, where I had parked my car in the front yard. I wasn't stealing anything, I promise. A woman quickly jumped up from the ground under my car. The lady's head popped up from the far side. I looked at her as she looked back at me over my car's roof. "I didn't say you were." The woman walked around to the passenger side of my car as I walked across the lawn towards her. "I'm just trying to..." She trailed off as a van screeched to a halt on the street in front of Janet's house. The side door slid open. 4 large black men were standing inside. One yelled to the lady, "Come on!" The lady looked at them. She then looked back at me one more time. Instantly, she ran to the street and jumped in the van. The door slid shut. The van peeled out and disappeared around the corner. I was left standing there alone as the snow fell around me, confusion once more affecting the expression on my face. A few seconds later, I turned and walked back to the house. White boy Bob passed me the pipe. I hit the rock and sat down. After an hour, Michaela let me know that she was ready to head out. So was I. Janet handed me a small folded-up paper. I put it in my pocket. It was dark out. Snow had been falling heavily that earlier hour. It didn't look like it was going to stop anytime soon. It took a few minutes to brush off my car before Michaela and I left Janet's house. The drive from inner-city Toledo to my house in Perrysburg was treacherous. The snow reflected off the headlights in the dark. The snow decreased my already subpar night vision. As we drove closer to my house, Michaela and I passed a couple of cars spun out in ditches. 15 minutes stretched to a half hour. Once home, I was happy to be in for the night, out of the cold and dark. Michaela and I took our coats and clothes off in the living room. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket before taking off my pants. I retrieved a spoon from the kitchen drawer. I set it on the table by my laptop in the living room before I went down a hallway to the bathroom to find a cotton swab. I came back and slid a syringe next to the spoon and cotton on the table. I took a crystal from a bag and shaved off a few points onto a digital scale. Then, I used a blade to push the pile onto the spoon. I squirted a few points of water onto the powder and dropped a piece of cotton into the suspension. I then unfolded the paper Janet had given me. Aw, man. I didn't get crack to mix with my crystal. I got heroin. I thought on it for a minute. What could I do? I was in for the night. I had drugs. It looked like I was about to do a heroin and crystal speedball instead of a crack and crystal cocktail. Whatever. I dumped the entire contents of the paper onto the spoon and mixed it up. I sucked the contents up from the spoon through the cotton and stood up next to the table in my living room. It was time for me to get lit. The act of injecting high-purity crystal methamphetamine was a unique and multifaceted experience. Once I found a vein, I would pull up on the plunger just a slight bit to see that the blood registered in the barrel. Then I would push the plunger until the syringe emptied. That was where the ride began. Ice would flow up my arm. A second later, the taste would hit the back of my throat. One more second, and the heat would hit the palms of my hands, the soles of my feet, the base of my skull, and my beehole. A split second later, I'd involuntarily inhale sharply as the rocket fuel took hold. That breath would begin the hyperventilating. There would be times I would jump up to my feet and run out of the room. Moments later, my breathing leveled out. I would be left with what I called googly vision. The surface heat wore off quicker than the googly vision. 10 minutes later, I would recover from the superficial effects. My brain would remain flying high for hours. Injecting meth was, by far, the most instantly overpowering method of administration. After the spring of 2018, I had very much varied my ROA. I mainly stuck with sniffing lines until my friend Kevin introduced me to hot rails. Hot rails became my preferred method from there. Injecting kept a spot in the rotation, depending on who I was with or the mood on a particular day. Every ROA of crystal was a distinct experience. I found insufflation, despite the first brain burn, was a pleasant and comforting high. Eating crystal would require the least re-up maintenance. The physical effects of eating crystal, such as feeling my heart pounding in my chest, tended to be too much. Smoking was a fast wave of pleasure, washing over me and moving on quickly. Smoking required more continual use. Plugging or booty bumping needed a precision for which I usually didn't have the patience. When Kevin introduced me to hot rails, they instantly became the route of administration I used 90% of the time. The positives of that method were numerous. The buzz of both sniffing and smoking, no burn if done correctly, easy, enjoyable to conduct, not much prep time, and the pipes became reserves to scrape instead of opening a bag and breaking up another crystal. Heroin, in contrast, was completely different. I had sniffed it and smoked it many times over the many years. Up until I was in my early 30s, though, shooting heroin was by far the best method and the one I would use most often. The rush from heroin is nothing like the rush of crystal meth, base cocaine, or cocaine. The intravenous prep method was the same with heroin as with other injectable hard drugs. Once it was pushed into a vein, that was where the experience diverted. Heroin took a few seconds to hit. I would first feel it in my lungs and chest. It was as if my breath had been taken away from me for just a second. Then, a microsecond later, waves of pleasure and comfort and contentedness would flow over my brain and wash out through my body. Heroin was somniferous. To what level was dependent on potency and quantity used. It was a walk on a razor's edge, such as was cocaine when injected, but it was the exact opposite side of the blade. That Thanksgiving in 2018 was about to be the first time I had injected heroin in years. It was about to be the first time I had injected heroin since well before I was using crystal daily. I was careless. I hadn't factored in the compounding effects of drugs on my system. Though I had the amount and potency of my crystal down to a science, I was not factoring the potency or quantity of heroin I was about to compound. I stood in the main living room area of my house. Michaela was lying on a couch across the room. I pushed the mixture into my circulatory system. A second later, it all hit at once. I became nauseated and dizzy. I stumbled to the couch. I put my head in Michaela's lap. The cold and black of that snowy Ohio evening permeated me entirely. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I woke up momentarily to water being thrown in my face. I stood up. I mumbled something short of words, and I stumbled to the kitchen sink to fill up a cup of water. I managed to chug the water as my knees gave out on me. I realized I was on my way to the floor. The darkness moved again from my periphery to consume me. Again, time passed. Again, I woke up with water in my face. Michaela helped me back to the couch. My head lay in Michaela's lap. She stroked my head as I went to sleep. Something in that hazy moment let me know I was through the worst of it. I slept peacefully as my friend watched over me. I was lost in the first moments of reanimation as the sunlight shone bright in my living room. I was at home. I was in my house and it was daytime. I felt rested. Michaela walked over to me from the kitchen area. She looked down at me as I rolled over to face her. I was naked on my couch. Michaela was wearing underwear. I wasn't sure if you're going to make it. I was close to calling 911 and taking off before they got here. Thanks for the vigilance last night. Somehow I always make it. You need to watch out. I was worried. Yeah, no more of that for a while. I should have specified to your mom what I wanted to trade. Oh well, it's over now. What do you want to do? We should get some food. I'm not really feeling Thanksgiving leftovers right now. Chapter 9. Don't get in your own way. In the 6 years I lived in my house, my marriage, my family, and my hopes of someday bending to fit into that world not mine, it all fell by the wayside. Any love I felt was fleeting, whether it was for others or for myself. My love for my house was stationary. It was my sanctuary from the pain of outside misalignments. It was a comfort when the familiar became too much to shoulder. It was my love when I could not find any love for myself. My home was a distraction from my own head when I was inside of both. I questioned if what I was doing was what I should be doing. It was different. It was uncomfortable. It was uncertain. It was exactly what I needed to be doing. I stayed the course. I sucked it up and emptied my house over the course of the following week. Whether it was through sales, storage, or moving into the room I began renting at my friend Jane's house, I painstakingly emptied my belongings from a place no longer my own. Memories of a past squandered were intermingled with specters of poignant recollections. My life, as was dust in the wind, blew away in the air. Who I was, as was sand on a beach, washed away into oblivion. Again, I questioned if what I was doing was the right choice for me. I had zero ambivalence when it came to one item of mine. I knew I was very ready to sell that item. I even accepted a mere $50 for it. It was my old nemesis. It was my riding mower. The mower managed one more parting shot that year as I helped the old man lift it up into the bed of his raised-up pickup truck. As I went to push the mower into the truck bed, the old man's grip slipped just a little. I had to push quickly to keep the mower from dropping down to the cement garage floor, and I tweaked my back. December 2018. The 6 years in the house I loved had ended. I sold my favorite car from my garage. I had sold off furniture and items to downsize. I had the items I wished to save, stored in a 52-foot trailer at a building which my stepdad owned. The items I wished to keep close went with me to my friend Jane's house on the outskirts of Perrysburg. My travel items remained in my car. At that point, I knew my future was going to be dedicated to travel. I wanted to keep a local mailing address. I wished to keep a home base, a place to sleep when needed, a place to regroup and recharge. I offered Jane a monthly amount, and she was happy to rent me a room. I loaded the room with a refrigerator, a microwave, an entertainment center, and all kinds of other items spared from the storage trailer. I even decorated my space with a few small fountains I bought on impulse while tweaking on crystal during various trips to local stores. My room at Jane's house was just as comfortable to me as the house I had moved from, just on a smaller scale. On the 1 or 2 nights I spent there each week, I filled my time with tweaked interactions online. I created media, I exchanged sex, I interacted with intimate online partners on live video. I was out of town at least 5 nights a week. My friend Kevin's apartment in Downriver, just south of Detroit, was an easy jump-off point for my many destinations around Michigan. Kevin, his girlfriend Sasha, and I hung out and did hot rails during the days. Kevin's friends from the Monroe and Detroit area were in and out all the time. I always let Kevin handle transactions. Kevin took the notoriety he seemed to relish amongst his friends. I maintained a position to remain disconnected and anonymous. There was a girl on the eastern side of Ohio whom I had been sharing online time with for a while. I freed up one evening. I agreed to see the girl out near Cleveland where she was living. I always dreaded that boring drive between Toledo and Cleveland on the Ohio Turnpike. It was a straight shot east from my house. It was only a couple of hours, but I never looked forward to taking 80-90 either direction. That evening, the drive wasn't as unpleasant as it usually was. I had anticipation as fuel for my trip. The crystal and the anticipation were a pleasant mix. Dawn and I both felt our meeting had potential to be magical. We were both excited. We had shared fantasies as we became familiar with one another over the previous weeks in contact. She was adventurous for sure. She was 29 years old and hadn't had much connection which she could utilize to indulge her fantasies. I was ready to be that blank canvas for her to paint her desires. Dawn met me outside as I pulled up to her house. She showed me where to park. It was a large farmhouse which was split into upper and lower living spaces. She lived in the upper section. We climbed the stairs to the second floor. She held my hand and guided me through the threshold at the top of the stairs. We went inside the house. Once inside, I set my bag down and stripped off my winter coat. Dawn brought me a plate of chicken and potatoes which she cooked for me. We sat on her couch together as I ate. We talked, sharing prolonged eye contact. The connection amplified. I knew it would. It always did. Dawn and I shared thoughts and fantasies. We shared hopes and ideas for the future. We shared past personal moments. We opened up to each other as I figured we would. We smiled as we talked. I ate the food Dawn had cooked. I drank a large glass of juice to wash it all down. I reached over to touch Dawn's hand, and I rubbed her hand with mine. No matter what your desire tonight, I want to show you how beautiful intimacy can be. I want your fantasies to become our shared memories. Dawn had done hard drugs on random occasions. She had never done crystal. I want to try it. I have a wonderful way for you to first experience it. I trust you. I took the needed items from my bag and set them up. Be ready when I kiss you. Dawn nodded her head. I did a hot rail as she looked on. I reached a hand up behind her head and palmed her hair. I pulled her mouth to mine. As we kissed passionately, my mouth transferred the smoke from my lungs to hers. We disengaged, and Dawn licked my lips. I whispered to her, "Exhale." Our eyes never broke gaze as smoke from Dawn's mouth filled the air around our heads. As she finished breathing out, we instinctively kissed again. While Dawn and I undressed each other, we did all we could to keep our lips and tongues intertwined. It was as if we were polar opposite magnets. The attraction was impossible to deny. Our drug-fueled night was underway. I've never opened up to anyone like this before. The drugs have something to do with that. I already planned to give you my everything tonight. I've been thinking about you since we first connected. Well, I'm happy to hear that, but the drugs are still part of it. Dawn was creative. She had fantasies for which she sought an outlet. She was as ready as I to push limits and experiment together. She was willing to be fully open and vulnerable. Dawn wished to share everything with me, everything except one thing. An oversight was impossible in that instance. It was an omission which only could have been deliberate. Dawn knew she kept a huge secret from me as our night began. The shock of the reveal the next morning didn't just catch me off guard. Dawn had lost track of time by then. The timing surprised her almost as much as it had me. Neither of us knew what was coming, though. All of our thoughts were in the present moments we shared together. Intimacy can include anything. The deeper our shared connection and the more open we are, the more we become one. I've never met anyone like you. You've really opened my eyes. I can't believe there's this entire world I haven't seen until now. I looked deeply into Dawn's eyes. I'm yours to show you the world you have yet to see. I'll obey any wish you have. The more unique it is, the more we become one as the moment becomes ours. Anything you've kept to yourself because you didn't have someone whose sole fantasy was to see your fantasies come true. Hours passed. Neither of us noticed. We were so lost in each other. Dawn let her lust override her self-preservation. I was still completely in the dark. She was too, but only because our intimacy was consuming all her thoughts. She should have been up front with me before I even showed up. She could have been up front with me at any point over the entire night. She never said a word. I was set to be blindsided in a terrible way. Hours later, when intimacy had peaked, we were both content. We had done much together. We both had made memories only we would ever share. It was 7 o'clock the following morning, the two of us dressed. Little did I know, new memories were about to be burned into my brain. Those memories involved someone else entirely, someone whom I was never given notice even existed. As I sat in the living room, fully dressed and packed up to leave, the door to the upper section of the house opened and slammed shut. A juiced-up and wild-eyed man ran in and instantly began yelling. First he yelled at Dawn. "What is this, Dawn? Who is this guy?" My eyes widened to match the new guy's eyes. I was shocked to see the fiancé Dawn said was no longer in her life standing irate in front of me in his living room. I grabbed my bag and began to step to the door. "What are you doing in my house? This is my house. That's my fiancé. You shouldn't be here." "You're right, man. I'm leaving. No worries." I kept repeating in a calm voice those 3 sentences. The guy was right in my face. He followed behind me to the door by the stairs. "You don't know how close you were to dying today." "You're right, man. I'm out right now." I made it to the landing at the very top of the stairs. I had a hand in my pocket. My other hand gripped the railing as I put a foot down onto the top step. Dawn's fiancé was directly behind me. He yelled nonstop. I stayed calm as I half expected a kick to my back to send me to the bottom of the steep staircase. The kick never came. I descended the stairs at a normal pace. Dawn's fiancé stayed at the top. He stared daggers as I walked out. He yelled again, "You're lucky you didn't die today." I reached my left hand into my left pocket and pulled out my car keys. The hand which I kept in my right pocket since I had been at the top of the stairs inconspicuously put the safety back on my handgun. Had I been kicked down the stairs, I would have shot that angry guy. I was never touched. I started my car and drove away. I was meeting up with people from the online world most days each week. Sometimes I met with multiple people in multiple cities on the same day. I was all over the place. I had time, I had the desire to meet new people all the time, and I loved to drive all over the place. Everywhere I went, I also had trusted associates to interact with and other ways to fund my constant travel. Sometimes the online world and the drug world would overlap and fill in all my sexual and financial needs in a single stop. A week after I left Dawn's fiancé's house, I was sitting on my bed at Jane's house scrolling through my phone. I noticed a message from the website. I opened it. It was a first contact message from someone in Florida. Zoe told me she appreciated what I had written in my profile. Her message wasn't the generic comments on my pictures and videos. She had taken the time to read and digest what I had put out there in the sections of my profile which gave insight into who I was. No played-out compliments or superficial observations. Zoe just shared understanding and commiseration. She had my attention. Zoe quickly gave me her phone number after a few back-and-forth messages on the website. We switched to texting. It was only a matter of minutes, and we were talking on the phone. That night, Zoe invited me to Cleveland 2 weeks later. Another boring, dreadful drive across the top of Ohio. I seemed to be making that trip frequently as 2018 came to a close. Zoe lived across the country where the palm trees and sunny beaches stayed warm in the winter months. I was confused as to why she was coming to Cleveland, Ohio in the first place, especially in the depths of a cold Midwest winter. Zoe invited me to stay the whole weekend with her in her hotel room. Zoe never blatantly said it, but she was a person of note in the LGBTQ community. I only figured that out when I searched her name online after our first phone call. She was national level mainstream. She had been for years. She never played up that angle with me. A pageant with Zoe's namesake was taking place over the weekend in Cleveland. It was to become an annual event. She had to be there to oversee it and host it. She wanted to be there for the non-pageant aspects of the weekend. I found a parking space at the hotel. It was a busy area of Cleveland just east of downtown. I had to drive through the maze of traffic-congested, interconnected strip mall parking lots to park on a slant at the hotel. I was up against a hill of plowed snow from earlier that evening. It was the only place to park. Again, I told myself that I was not going to be in the Midwest for any future winters. I checked the room number Zoe sent me when I arrived. Zoe had flown into town early that morning. She had spent the day overseeing the first setup of the first show of her event. She had been back at the hotel for about an hour when I arrived. I stepped into the hotel elevator and hit the button. I knocked twice on the door to Zoe's room. I had butterflies in my stomach. Zoe opened the door seconds later. We smiled and locked eyes. Zoe's tan skin was a contrast to her white bathrobe. The cleavage between her breasts a golden bronze. I assumed it was intentional how her robe was undone. Zoe's eyes still managed to capture my gaze more than anything else, just barely though. Zoe had me undressed by the time I went through the door. Her lips and mine danced together. I disrobed her. When the two of us reached the bed, we were both fully naked. We fit together perfectly. The magic was instant, the intimacy unparalleled. We both felt transcendence that evening. The night was ours. Nothing else but our pleasure permeated our thoughts. Hours passed. Zoe and I melted into each other. We were soaked in each other's sweat. We pulled into one another's bodies, our lips interlocked. We reached climax together. The two of us took our first break from each other's bodies to do some crystal. We both had crystal. My crystal was a bit better. It was always better. I used to try other varieties when other people randomly had their own. 100% of the time, I would then tell them to put theirs away. The rest of the night was always on me. I wasn't just being hospitable in those instances. From day one, way back in spring 2017, I was a crystal snob. It not only worked out for me, but for anybody who happened to be around. It never failed to help build my trusted clientele. It never failed to spare me from an inferior product going into my body. It never failed to treat whomever I was with to an unlimited amount of a substance beyond any potency they had known before. A true win-win, win-win-win. Zoe and I each managed 2 hours of sleep early that next morning. I woke up to Zoe's alarm. We were still cuddling, and Zoe opened her eyes right after I did. There was light coming through the sides of the window curtains. I knew Zoe had an extremely busy day. I knew we both had to get up from the bed. I put on my clothes and grabbed my bag. Zoe and I kissed a bit more. Zoe stepped into the shower as I stepped into the hallway of the hotel. The door shut behind me, and I walked down the hall towards the elevator. I had another stop to make while I was in the area for the day. Chapter 10. Record Lows. A deep cold hit the Midwest during the 2018-2019 winter. The last weeks of January 2019 were poised to set records and pose a very real health risk for residents of the flyover states. Wind chills below -40 degrees Fahrenheit swept in, and the cold settled deep. Cars failed to start, and ice on the frozen road was so entrenched that no salt or plows could remove it. I had spun out before in rain, snow, sleet, and ice, conquering horrible weather and driving treacherous roads, but I had never seen anything like that winter. Driving even at 5 miles an hour was too fast, making it impossible to control a car on ice that cold. I had always loved extreme weather. I was 12 when I saw my first tornado and had chased them ever since. However, that winter's weather was not the type which I wished to chase. It physically hurt in seconds, and one breath in that frigid air took the life from my lungs. Worry was on everyone's mind at Jane's house. We feared the pilot light on Jane's furnace would go out, or the furnace would fail against the workload, leaving us without a heat source. Despite the insulation, just a few days into the super chill, the temperature stole the heat from the house. Space heaters couldn't keep up, and it took effort to resolve the situation. We managed the problem with the help of Jane's ex, who was an electrician. It was a legit life-or-death, time-sensitive situation, and teamwork proved essential between the three of us. Finally, we had heat in the house again, but the cold outside was sticking around for the long haul. In the week before the deep freeze set in, I first interacted with a girl from the website who lived in Tiffin, Ohio, an hour southeast of Toledo. That following week, fully immersed in the devastating cold, I headed to Tiffin. Tiffin was a small city surrounded by farmlands. It had a legitimate small downtown, but barns and tractors lined the highway in all directions from the city. Flat fields encompassed the countryside, barren and snow-covered through the winters, stereotypical Midwest. I parked on a downtown street and took a short 50-foot walk to the Tiffin apartment. The wind burned my face and fingers, and I could barely open my eyes. There were 2 flights of outdoor stairs exposed to the elements leading up to the apartment door. After a minute and a half outside, I cursed all of existence as I shivered down to my bones. Haley let me inside. Her apartment, though not as cold as the wind whipped outside, was still below freezing. Her utilities had been shut off, and it was her last day in the apartment as she had been evicted. Haley, a Toledo native, grabbed her bag as I prepped and blew down a couple of hot rails. The drugs did nothing to warm up my core. It had only been 5 minutes since I first stepped out of my car. The heat in my car had quit working back in late fall, making the cold even worse. I had been driving around that winter with nothing but my own body heat for warmth. I managed fine until the really cold weather hit, a battle I couldn't win. When I picked up Haley that day, I knew I was in for some chicanery. No matter how cold and uncomfortable I was, I knew Haley had to be feeling worse. That day, Haley begun her second day of heroin withdrawal. I had a rule for myself the whole time I lived with my friend Jane. I never brought or invited anyone to Jane's house. Jane allowed me to live with her and her 2 adolescent sons, but my business, whether work or pleasure, was always handled elsewhere. I never had friends over. Besides the mutual friends from my home city I shared with Jane and the friends she had herself invited over, everyone else remained in the dark about my residence. It was drug-induced paranoia, but also my diligence to protect my friend and her kids. That first night with Haley was a long one. I drove her from Tiffin to inner-city Toledo. We stopped on a street near my grandma's house, a neighborhood I knew well from years prior. I remembered waiting on those streets for heroin dealers, the stress through the roof as friends ran inside houses to score drugs. The longer we sat in cars on those streets, the more likely we were to be approached by police, or worse. Haley claimed we had stopped at her aunt's house to pick up some money. I didn't say anything, but thought otherwise. Sitting in my cold car on that street, I had the same feeling from all those years ago. I didn't feel the need to call Haley out on her maneuvering that evening. As the sun went down, it grew colder. Haley insisted she needed only $80 more to get her apartment back. After a few fruitless stops, I finally reached my limit of patience. Just before dawn, I stopped by an inner-city carryout, withdrew $80 from an ATM, and gave it to Haley. She promised to pay me back, but I knew I would never see that money again. I didn't care. I was cold and needed heat. I picked a hotel from my travel app and began driving towards West Toledo. It was after 6 in the morning, and I had to try for the earliest of early check-ins. Both Haley and I shared the same physical symptoms from the cold, our legs burning and numb simultaneously. I thought we might be in the first stages of freezing to death. As we drove by a house that jogged my memory, Haley heard me laugh to myself. She inquired, and I told her a story from the house we had just passed, one that had taken place only months before. I had met a lady on the website, the same site where I met Haley. I drove out to her house. She wasn't the lady from her profile. If she was, then her profile pictures were at least a decade old. I decided to walk in and sit down anyhow. I kept rejecting the lady's advances. She kept walking upstairs for a minute at a time. I was about to get up and leave. All of a sudden, an older, angry guy in his white brief underwear stomped down the stairs. The guy had a 70s blaxploitation mustache and an attitude. He yelled just a couple sentences at me before stomping back upstairs. "Hey man, my sister tells me you're a nice guy, but you need to pay her $40. What don't you understand about giving her the money?" I didn't even bother to unholster my gun while at that house. I kept it secure in my ankle. After the brother went back upstairs, I got up to leave. The sister tried to get me to stay. I threw two 20s on the floor in front of the couch. I had been hoodwinked. I paid $40 for that life lesson. Haley laughed a little. She told me that what happened to me was unfortunate. I remained silent. I was thinking how Haley had taken me for twice that amount of money just an hour before I told her that story. Freezing in my car, Haley and I made it to the hotel on Reynolds Road in Toledo. It had been a battle the entire night to see through the windshield of my car while driving. Our breath in the frigid air had created a situation where ice formed almost instantly on the inside of the glass. I constantly used an ice scraper on my windshield as I drove. I pulled into what I guessed was a parking space in front of the hotel. I greeted the Indian man at the counter. "No rooms this early. We've been in my car all night without heat. We can't last much longer." The man took pity on me. "Give it half hour. Come back then." Haley and I walked together to the shower in the hotel room. We spent the rest of that day in our warm room, fully naked and making videos. The cold outside raged on. Our minds were elsewhere for the time. It reached 6:30 the following morning. Haley and I had spent a full 24 hours of warmth in that hotel, but I had to be somewhere. I showered again. I hurried and dressed. Where am I taking you? It took me 15 minutes to scrape the ice from the inside of my windshield. All the ice shavings fell onto my dashboard. My car was running the entire time, and it didn't heat up inside at all. I ran back upstairs to tell Haley that the car was ready to go. I hurt everywhere from the cold. I tried to focus my thoughts away from the fact that hell had frozen over. The drugs were no match for the Ohio winter. I didn't expect any relief from the cold for the next hour. I had a drive ahead of me to the Detroit airport. It was 7 in the morning, and I was on the interstate heading north out of Ohio. The sun was shining that morning. No clouds were in the sky. It was bright to the point of distraction as I crossed into Michigan. I was so cold, and the light reflecting from the ice all around me was making the drive one of the most dangerous trips I had ever taken. Cars around me on the highway were littered about on the sides of the lanes. Some cars had obviously spun out on the ice. Others sat more orderly and straight. They seemed to have given into the cold, abandoned by their drivers. I knew that if I succumbed to either of those fates, if I ended up on the side of that road, I would be in for a terrible death at the hands of the Midwest winter temperatures. After a white-knuckle drive, I finally pulled into the big blue deck parking garage to store my car at the Detroit airport. I began to ascend the levels of parking. I was pushing it for time, but if I could park and get through security inside the terminal in the next hour, I'd be able to walk to the gate just as boarding was about to begin. I kept climbing the parking levels, driving in circles to make my way higher. Panic began to fill my mind. Panic eclipsed my hatred for the cold when I reached the top level of the parking garage. An hour had passed. I had scoured the entire complex. There was nowhere to park. Defeated, I wound my way back down through the parking garage. My flight was scheduled for departure in 15 minutes. I called the airline as I heard other flights above me taking off and landing. 20 minutes of explaining, being put on hold, and explaining again secured me a different flight, along with spending $400 extra, and along with a 12-hour wait until my new departure time. I had 12 more hours in the frozen wasteland of the Midwest. I left the airport to take another hour-long drive back the other direction, another hour without heat. The cold once again became my focus. Hell, it really had frozen over. I ran from my car into Walmart when I reached Perrysburg that morning. The heated store felt amazing. I sat on a bench inside the store for 10 minutes before I was able to walk into my bank. I decided the $1,000 in cash I had in my pocket was better off in my bank account. I deposited the money, leaving me with $4 in my wallet. I was so hungry. I went to the grocery section and picked out a few things to eat. When I went to pay at the register, my debit card was declined. I protested, then I walked back over to my bank. I explained the situation to the bank teller. After another 15 minutes with the bank teller on the phone, I was told my money issue had been resolved. I went back to the checkout line and tried to pay again. Again, my card was declined. Again, I walked over to my bank. That time, after a few more minutes, I was told I would be able to use my card in another 15 minutes. I walked back outside without waiting around. I was 10 minutes from Jane's house. I would eat when I got home. The cold outside the doors of Walmart abruptly ended my hunger. I had no choice but to switch my focus from eating to the very real possibility of freezing to death. I thought by midday that day, I would have already left the Midwest in the nightmare cold. I was supposed to be on my approach to my destination as I sat in my room at Jane's house and thought about the day thus far. I snapped out of my daze, and I informed Madison of my new arrival time to Kalispell, Montana. I thought ahead to the evening. I got online and searched parking lots close to the Detroit airport with shuttle service to the terminal. I found an independently run parking lot 4 miles from the terminal. I pulled my debit card from my wallet to book a reservation for parking spaces ahead of time. I wasn't about to head to Detroit again without a secured parking space. When my card was declined, I called my bank customer service department. Unlike the bank teller physically standing before me at my bank earlier, the lady on the phone explained to me what was going on. Since it wasn't me who directly rebooked my flight earlier that morning, my debit card had been flagged. The issue with my bank flagging fraud from the rebooking of my flight was resolved after some stress and more time on the phone. I then kept my card out and I reserved a parking place at the off-site lot in Detroit. I planned to head out from Jane's house early enough to give me time to park, take the shuttle, and board my flight with ease. The cold had permeated my car's engine when I went to leave Jane's house. My luck was proving to be bad all day long. Somehow, I eventually managed to start my car. I wasn't worried about time. I had plenty. The cold was again my immediate concern. 15 miles up into Michigan, I decided to stop in Monroe for some fast food. I still had plenty of time. I was halfway to the airport. I was hungry. I exited the freeway and I stopped at a drive-thru restaurant. I ordered my food and pulled around to the restaurant window. I opened my car door because my window was frozen shut. I opened my wallet to get my card to pay. I had eaten only once that day, right when I reached Jane's house in the morning. I was looking forward to the fish sandwich, chicken nuggets, and fries. It was worth feeling the frigid air slam into me as I opened my door at the pickup window. The cashier extended her hand from the drive-thru window. My response was unexpected. I opened my wallet, and a two-word sentence escaped my lips. "Oh no." I still had the $4 in my wallet. I no longer had the $1,000 in my other pocket. The cash was in my bank as of that morning. The issue with my debit card had been resolved. I was fully able to use my card with no issues, except my card wasn't in my wallet. It was on the table in my room at Jane's house, left there after I reserved the parking space. Hunger and even the cold were once again pushed from my mind. I suddenly had bigger issues. I had a choice to make. I was still good on time, but that would all go out the frozen window if I opted to try to make it back to recover my debit card. I pulled away from the drive-thru with nothing to eat. I made a choice. I was going to head to the northwest corner of Montana with only the $4 I had in my pocket. I wasn't going to miss a second flight out of that terrible Midwest winter hell. I was going to travel across the entire country without enough money to buy a sandwich along the way. I got back on the freeway and I drove north from Monroe, Michigan. I found the parking lot up by the airport. I was hungry, cold, and fed up with the day's ridiculousness. I parked in the congested, snow-covered lot. I did the best I could to shield myself from the wind, and I slid my way across the lot to the shuttle loading area. Before I could reach the small metal overhang, the shuttle left the airport. It was another 15 minutes of standing in high winds and negative temperatures before the next shuttle picked me up.